Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another VIP episode of the Hero Paranormal Podcast, broadcasting from the base at La Madre Mountain, just south of Area 51. My name is Ryan, the original outlaw of the airwaves, bringing you an epic episode tonight. On today's podcast, we have a beyond amazing guest, Eric Mitchell. He has an amazing story. He's a guy who spoke with astronaut Edgar Mitchell before his death with frequency and spoke about UFOs and what they mean. When Eric Mitchell isn't talking to astronauts, he might be discussing UFOs with CIA agents or something else along those lines. Eric is an absolutely awesome guy who had his life changed forever by a series of strange events. Eric's amazing story has gained the attention of a Harvard University study, and Eric has a fantastic documentary coming out called Experiencer. This can be found at experiencerdoc.com. I'm very excited and interested about this groundbreaking Harvard study which will document the mental and physical anomalies experiencers tend to demonstrate which defy traditional science and physics. Huge things connecting academia and UFOs right now. And Eric is smack dab in the middle of it all. Eric Mitchell has worked with and helped UFO organizations and people all over the world, well over 3,000 to date, certainly making him an expert in the field of UFO advocacy. He has a lot of useful and valuable information to share with the masses and to help us all be better human beings in general. Opening up about his own amazing experiences, Eric has helped a variety of others, revealing the mind's connection to these types of events and what it all really means. Join us going down the rabbit hole with experiencer Eric Mitchell as we learn more about some of the biggest questions of our time. Eric Mitchell, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me on, Ryan. It's a pleasure.
I've been really excited to talk to you. There's so many things that I can't wait to discuss, and it's just so awesome, all the things that you're involved with. And I don't know where to start. Let's talk about, let's see, where can we kick this off? Now, Eric, you had 3 initial sightings that I would love to delve into. How's the best way to go about that and kicking this thing off?
Well, sure. I actually spent 34 years of my life thinking that people who believed in UFOs were absolutely nuts. Tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy and growing up. So the first time I woke up just outside of my door, which was strange, because here I am outside, and my left shoulder is facing the door, and my right shoulder is facing the end of a short dead-end street. It was very, very short, and my eyebrows were kind of squeezing together because I couldn't really ascertain anything of what I was looking at. It looked like a 40-foot in diameter orange glowing sphere. It looked like the sun. It rippled, and it was very stationary just off the ground. And I must have looked at it for about 20 minutes, just like, what is this? And, I went inside, left the door open, brewed some coffee. I kept looking, and it was there. So I thought, by sunrise, I'd see what this optical illusion is and be able to laugh at myself. But by sunrise, I looked out, and it was gone. And that was around 4:30 in the morning. About 9:30 that night, I was pacing my one-story building, having a cigarette, kids in the house, smoke outside. Mm-hmm. And this thing kind of almost in the same area, just turns on very slowly. Not like a light bulb, but very, very slowly turns on and starts moving about 2 miles an hour, blinking completely off and completely on, and doing like a horseshoe shape around me as I'm turning my body watching this thing. Obviously, when you see something like this, it gives you that primitive feeling like you've run into a bear in the woods and you want to keep your eye on it. You know, you don't want to, it's showing intelligent control. It's obviously aware that I'm there, and it's going around me. And it ended up just above my one-story apartment, above my head, just above the door frame there. It was maybe 12, 15 feet from my forehead. It flashed twice very quickly and shot away like a bullet. And, of course, my knees were locked. My hands were shaking. I couldn't even move. I was just floored by what I was looking at. And in none of this questioning in my brain ever thought of a UFO, because in my mind a UFO would be like a 1950s film with a little saucer hanging off a fishing string.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what it was. I had to kind of rule out military because there's just no way we have that technology. And it was incredible. By the next day, I was working on my car with my buddy, and he went to go inside, and I knelt down to tie my shoe, and I felt this vibration on the top of my head. And it was so subtle, I didn't think much of it at first, and it was like someone had turned the volume up all the way. It knocked me to the ground. I describe it like if you ever go to a rock and roll concert and stand in front of the speaker, you feel that vibration bouncing off of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you can imagine that times a million directed at your head, you can feel it everywhere, but directed at your head. I rocked back and forth as if I was a magnet, underneath a stronger magnet. My vision was damaged at the time. I knew I was throwing up, but only because my throat was opening for a long period of time and closing. So I knew I was throwing up, but I was just so engulfed that all I could think is, oh my God, I'm being killed. That lasted about 12, 15 seconds. Felt like forever. And I pushed myself off the ground. I looked up. The object was right above me, and it flashed twice again and shot off the opposite it did, the night before. So I know my left ear was bleeding, my nose was bleeding, and I had vomit all over me. And I know it sounds funny, but I laid there for like 20 minutes. It was a primal instinct, not to move. Something might see you, try to make it to the door slowly. I already seen how fast this thing was, so I had no chance of making it to the door. So it took about 20 minutes to actually go inside. And once I did, I got into the bathroom floor, laid there because the tiles were cold and I was overheated, and I passed out.
Wow.
So that was usually what I can fit in on doing radio shows, but that was the beginning of a very long interaction with this thing.
Amazing. It's such an amazing experience. And now these sorts of things bring about brain anomalies and neurological expansion, I guess you could call it, of awareness sometimes, don't they?
It did. I guess my investigators and people that have kind of screened me psychologically in just about every way, they noticed that, here I am, this southern guy from Arkansas, speaking, very slowly, low vocabulary, 110 IQ, to rapidly growing into, 150 IQ, losing most of the accent, and educating myself constantly. I devoured libraries when I should be sleeping. I could only sleep about maybe 3 or 4 hours a night, which is still to this day. I sleep about 3 or 4 hours, and that's enough to take care of it.
So
I craved information. I went through. A lot of people would say that, wow, that's amazing, but savant syndrome is very, it's terrible to adjust to. My hearing was picking up literally everything, and my brain had the inability to decipher everything all at once. It was almost like obtaining ADHD or, being on the spectrum somehow.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But over time, just like everything, you tend to get used to it, and it became something very useful for me once I kind of mastered that. But I did go through times of, I definitely thought I might have had a brain tumor or somehow delusional, and none of this was happening, even though,
Sure.
my neighbors were all over it, taking pictures of these things. My investigative team was conducting, investigation, picking up on high strangeness, high EMF fields in the area, and witness statements, and it goes on and on and on and on with the investigation. They look in every direction. They want it submissible, which means, if I had to go to court over this and win one day, that they gathered enough evidence where it would, pass before a judge or a jury. So it was very difficult. Oftentimes, I don't talk about this, but it got so distracting for myself. I would lay down in the bathtub and turn on the water and just listen to the individual drops to keep my mind busy, just to maybe get a break and subside for a little while.
I hear you. Wow. And, experiencers have a variety of traits that take place after a scenario like this, and they've been likened to a type of antenna or person that can serve as a beacon of sorts to the phenomenon afterwards. Is that safe to say?
It's very safe to say, extremely safe to say. There are things that are of my opinion that might make people roll their eyes until they look into it. This classic blue light that fills up your bedroom or your car while you're driving. Usually you'll see this blue light. Witnesses said that when I got knocked down, there was a pencil beam blue light just hitting the top of my head. So almost every time you see this blue light is maybe, it just surely isn't a phenomenon to light the way for these craft to go. They don't need that. This is an interaction of the brain, and this is what I completely believe because I've been there, done that. Now universities like Stanford University with Dr. Gary Nolan, he has studied the brain of the quintessential experiencer, and he's finding this caudate-putamen basal ganglia area really firing up, and it's very much responsible for empathy, what a lot of people don't believe in, psychic ability. We do have that, and so many other extraordinary sensory perceptions that have been made fun of for since the birth of Christianity, which is funny because that whole area you don't find that very particular gene in the genome. It's a big black area for empaths and psychics and stuff like that because they were slaughtered back in that area. Come to find out, but this particular part of the brain that fires up, it's white hot, so it looks like a white dead brain matter to a lot of people that don't know what they're looking at under an MRI, but it's actually somehow possesses the ability of non-locality. For instance, if you take a person in a cohort group that has never had an experience and you take a look at their brain, ask them to solve a question or a puzzle, you're going to see firing of left and right synapses going on and off until they, finally decide or make a decision on this puzzle. What you see with the quintessential experiencer is the caudate-putamen basal ganglia, or quote-unquote the antenna. It will fire up, immediately have the answer, and there's no brain activity outside of that.
Cool.
Almost like it's asking the universe a question, and it's getting it from the outside somehow. So you can see where here's the science, but here's where spirituality kind of crosses through. How does consciousness itself leave the mind and come back with answers? Where is it going? How is this operating? And the only placeholder word that's really used for this is quantum entanglement. Einstein's spooky action at a distance. Einstein walked away from it. He didn't like that, but it's a part of our lives all the time. And once we learn how to utilize it, we won't even recognize today's technology. It'll all be obsolete, but that's basically how it works. There is for a very small instance, there's an electromagnetic wand that the Mayo Clinic has, and it's opened up for some human trials and all animal trials. and you literally hold it 3 inches over the brain, over the head. You don't have to cut into the skull or anything like that. Just wave a wand over the skull, and you're going to get, a reaction out of your mental synopsis, because consciousness itself, or mental synopsis, is basically a tiny sliver in the electromagnetic field. So once you have an electromagnetic field that's conducive, they'll interact at a distance, even if it's only 3 inches. But there's no telling how far that can go if you kind of up the power. Under EEGs, you're looking at the average person having 7.38 hertz brain. Coincidentally, the same frequency in which DNA speaks to each other. When you take a typical experiencer, you're going to look at least 30 hertz, sometimes 50, sometimes 100. These people meditate a lot. They don't have an inner dialogue, bothering them all the time. And I was recording actually in a Nashville recording studio at 1,590 hertz at will when I was asked to do so.
Whoa!
So that's pretty impressive for everybody once they ran diagnostics and figured out it was actually me doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and so
I could take up the whole show on how all this stuff works, but it's basically that.
It's amazing. Let's get into the quantum entanglement. That just fascinates me a little bit, and how people know how to look up or know when to look up and interact with these things.
That's exactly right. In the very beginning, I did reach out to ufology, which is essentially a business. If you're not in it to make money or something like that, it's really not a direction you need to go. If you have an experience, especially if you're being studied, you kind of want to make use out of that, And I really didn't want to talk about, the actual things that happened to me, because they just sounded too woo-woo. I wanted science to explain that. How in the world do I feel like a magnet scooting across the ground left and right when I'm not a magnet? Mm-hmm. The answer to that is the iron in your blood is actually negatively charged. So if you have a high pulsing electromagnetic field, you're going to feel like you're being pushed away from it. You are going to be pushed away from it. The burns on my skin, or just where it kind of has the lift of the positive charge, and the burns on the skin only last a few days. A lot of scientists that work with high-powered magnets or electromagnetism know to protect their eyes, because it will push and pull on your eyes at the same time, and you end up wearing reading glasses, which is what I wear now because of the incident. So it left a lot of evidence behind. I was just too afraid to talk about things that didn't make sense. Gosh, I'm trying not to go too many different directions.
I love it.
And not answer your question. But what was your question again?
Yeah, no, you nailed it. Basically, how these this is exactly kind of what I wanted to get into. Can we talk about your vision and how it was manipulated or changed after your sighting?
Excuse me. Sorry about that time of year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what specifically would you want to look at? I mean, as far as an optometrist, they would tell you what happened. Did you get close to a big magnet? I've been 20/20 my whole life. It was actually hard to get in the car and drive to the local dollar store and try to find a Band-Aid, if you will. Mm-hmm. And they worked. They worked perfectly. I can see far away and up close.
It's amazing.
With just $5 reading glasses.
So cool. Yeah, I'm just fascinated by that. And you've had some amazing experiences kind of getting, into the military involvement, which may have been monitoring or engaging with UFOs. Can we get into that a little bit? Maybe silent helicopters and other stuff?
Sure. I mean, there was a lot going on at the same time. So I'd love to throw just a timeline down. But while this is happening, 10 other things are happening, so it's really difficult to, put together everything all at once. But my neighbor, Debbie, sweet older lady, she cleaned out Lakeshore Condos, rooms, adding soaps, changing the sheets, and She went into this man's room, and she'd already noted the guy was arrogant and really, really rude. But there were developed pictures of me and my kids all over his bed, and there was a ledger on the nightstand, and she read it too. I mean, it was everything that we did: going to Walmart, playing in the park, going swimming, watching movies, what movie we actually went into. It was creepy.
Dang.
And, you know, she called me up, and my first thought was, I have 2 teenage daughters. You know, we got us a creeper on our hands.
Yep.
But I told Debbie, I said, hang up the phone, go to the office, get that man's name. I want his name now. So she calls me back, and she said it was Lieutenant Colonel Dallas E. Wood. So I called my investigator. I let him know. He dug up 5 faces for her to pick out in a lineup, and she picked out the one that worked in the Department of Foreign Relations, Foreign Technologies, and several other, projects. And this was the guy to be stalking me and my kids. So, you know, there were, I think the first time a helicopter showed up, myself, Dan was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for 8 years. He did 2 terms, served in the Air Force, and he moved home with his wife right across from me. So we became good friends. And we're bellied up to my Cadillac, and this thing, you really can't look away from it. I mean, it's just, it's such a marvel that your brain can't even believe it's right in front of you. But it was below the tree line. I could have taken off a shoe and threw it and hit it. That's how close it was. So we're just kind of bellied up to the car, and we didn't even hear this helicopter coming from behind us. But as soon as it broke the tree line, you can hear it, and it dipped down. The object immediately took off. Otherwise, I wouldn't have turned around to look at a helicopter right behind me. You know, I mean, there's no way. I'll take my chances with the chopper. But this thing just took off like a bullet, almost like they've met before, you know. And we turned around. I was holding my hat on my head, and this guy looked like he was just going to land right there in the street. I mean, he was just above the street. You can see the windshield. You can see the big goggles on his face, his chin, his nose. He spotlighted us right in our face. I mean, it was like a point-blank spotlight. And then he took the spotlight, went up and down the street, and then kind of in the yard across the street, I guess looking for maybe other witnesses. And he rose up and went back over the trees. And I immediately told my daughter, I said, sweetheart, the military knows. Go inside, brew some coffee. We're going to get some answers tonight, you know, because that's what happens in the movies. But how it really happens is people in the CIA pull a, what is that called? Domestic intelligence report. And that's just a basic report to file out so they can literally spy on an American citizen. You know, they have the right to do that now, apparently.
Right.
And so they kind of monitor you from a distance, really. We had a couple of recruiters. They said they were recruiters. Knocked on my door when I wasn't home. Went inside with 2 underage females, which is a PR no-no. You don't do that.
Jeez.
If you represent the military, you don't even get on an elevator with an underage female. Just leaves room for whatever might happen, you know, as far as rumor or just something. Just don't do it because you represent, you know, armed forces. One of them went down the hallway and said he had to go to the bathroom. And the other one kept the other 2 busy. Now, recruiters always give you cards, names, phone numbers. They'll give you a laptop if you let them. But my daughter got a little shaken, and she went down the hallway and noticed the bathroom door was open and the light was off. There was nobody in there. So she walked into my room, and this man was going through my desk. And she said, what are you doing in my dad's room? And he said, well, I was in here, I saw a kitty, and I wanted to pet it. And they immediately kind of scrambled and left. Meanwhile, Dan's calling me at work saying something's wrong because they parked their vehicle way down at the end of the street, the mailboxes, walked to your front door, and closed the door when they went in there with your daughters. He said, son, this is not how they act. Something's wrong here. So by the time I rushed home, they were gone already. I was angry, as you can imagine, Ryan. So I went straight to all the recruiting offices. They're all right next door to each other. And I went looking for these men, and they did not work, for the recruiting offices.
Right.
So I have no idea who they were. But later on, we did find a GPS tracking device in my desk. It was in the drawer, and it was kind of had like a sticky on it, taped up underneath. And there was another one found underneath my, my driver's seat car. My son had dropped a Game Boy, rolled under the seat. He retrieved it and then grabbed the chip. And he said, "Dad, this is a tracking device." Well, my son was like 10 years old at the time. I'm laughing at him. I said, "You're playing too many video games." And he said, "No, I know what this is." So he took it upon himself to send it to my investigator because I didn't think much of it. And it turned out to be a late 1940s, early 1950s tracking device. When I called my investigator, I said, "Well, I can understand one being in my vehicle, but why would one be in my desk?" He said, "Eric, if you ever move, they'd find out about it that way." So, I guess that kind of makes sense. But it was extremely invasive. It made me incredibly angry with my countrymen, with the people that take the oath to protect and serve their people and not treat them like lab rats. But essentially, that's how it works.
Yeah, man. Wild. It's so wild. And now, your neighbors, my understanding is you were one of the last, if not the last, to leave this particular area. Is that true?
Yeah. With the activity, helicopters, all that stuff, people, they were freaked out. There were an awful lot of people moving very quickly, people that couldn't even afford it. And there was also people, since I live in a small town in Arkansas, they were all kind of gathering out there, maybe 20, 30 people at a time. Once people started talking, they wanted to see what this was. So they would pull up in their vehicles and just kind of wait. And sure enough, on an almost nightly basis, it would show up, not in the sky, but literally in the yard. So there was interaction. A lot of people got scared from that. The church asked me to stop coming. There was a big rumor going around that I was calling the devil down from the sky, and it scared a lot of people. I live in the Bible Belt, so this is why religious people kind of took things that direction. But I would know. I'd be just in my house doing whatever it is I'm doing, and I'd drop everything and just go straight to the door because I would feel that connection. I would feel what direction it was. And it's not surprising to me that a lot of people that have sightings will say that. They'll say, "I just thought to look up, and there it was." That's no mistake. There's a big sky out there, and if you know what direction to look every single time, there's probably something else going on that you probably wouldn't fully understand.
Man, it's always occurred to me that it is somewhat of a spiritual kind of genre. Would you consider UFO activity a somewhat spiritual phenomenon in some sense?
Well, the feeling by definition, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there is a big fight. What if it is a biblical type of thing, or what if it's an alien type of thing? I would be surprised if it's just that simple. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. It could be a part of a Symbian circle that has just eluded us for thousands of years, even though everywhere you look in religion, you see these orange glowing spheres. What if you were to look at our Bible and see these saints? Every saint you see has this orange glowing sphere behind their head.
Yeah.
Some people might argue that that's a halo, but it's depicted several different times differently in the Bible. Amun-Ra, this god of Egypt was absolutely described as one of the gods of Egypt. And, it was seen quite often. It was marked down quite often. You go over to India, you go to China. Everywhere you go, you see the same thing. But what does it mean? What is it?
Yeah. It does seem like the West is a little bit slow learning in some of these things. Let's talk about, well, I guess let's get into it. Let's talk about the fifth floor, the aviary guys, and I'm asking about the CIA. Can we get into a little bit of that?
Yeah, I looked into, I think I made some people angry, but, hey, whatever. But I was spending time, I was sick at the time, and I was spending time with Audrey Hewins from Starborn Support. And I showed her my lead on this guy in the Pentagon, and we started digging up everything on him. And we came across this thing called OSAP, a thing called ATIP, and a thing called the Phenomenology Desk. And it was very elusive, and these people would have conversations with bird names like blue jay or owl, and they were called the aviary. And these are, I guess, what people would call the men in black. Maybe so. It's our CIA officials that look into these types of things. ATIP was just to see if these things were a threat, and that was just a compartmentalized need-to-know type of framework. The Phenomenology Desk is on the 5th floor of the Pentagon, and I know it's called a desk. That's kind of to throw people off. You would expect to see one or two people behind a desk, but these are about 200 people that have been highly active in the subject for decades now, and they operate in various ways. I had a friend of mine help me put the names and dossiers on Google, so people can look that up, and hopefully it's not taken down again, but it does have, like Blue Jay would be a geneticist. His name was Dr. Christopher Green, and it has a dossier of his career. At one time, he was the head of the Phenomenology Desk, but he's since gone retired, and he's actually doing oversight at Stanford University on experiencer studies. So when people say that our officials aren't interested in people like me, they're dead wrong. They just want to keep everything hush-hush.
Right. So true. And can we get into the group of elite scientists who advise the United States government on matters of science and technology a little?
Well, there's a lot of groups. I'm not sure specifically which one you're talking about. Maybe the Jason Society or...
Yep, exactly. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Jason is... I haven't met any of them, but I had high suspicion that they were involved in this subject. I mean, you want to take the smartest advisors in the world and leave them out of national security subjects, that would be absolutely nuts. So, but they're actually named after July, August, September, October, November, i.e. Jason. And those are the times of years they actually all meet up and discuss, all the things that pertain to many different subjects, climate change, ufology itself, and so many other things. And I've been in high suspect that they've been involved with the Phenomenology Desk for at least a couple of decades now. But pretty much some of the smartest people you'll meet. And,
yeah. So cool.
We do have to have these things. A lot of times we'll bring a philosopher from another country and sit them down in a skiff and just have their, of course you have a lot of scientists, neuroscientists, psychologists, you have all these things, but even a philosopher can look at these upcoming problems that we have countrywide and worldwide and maybe give their 2 cents. And I mean, that's how these, these types of meetings work. But I think it's just incredible how little they have found out about our visitors.
Right. So true. And I'm with you. I'm kind of a big fan of it as well. I mean, it's an expansion of things that we need to look into. And I mean, consciousness is really at the center of it all.
It is.
It's a big deal.
It's huge. I mean, every 100 years, we believe we reach the pinnacle of humanity. Maybe we can invent a couple of more things in the next 10 years, but right now we're at the pinnacle of, humanity. And every 100 years we're wrong. We're absolutely wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's foolish to think, that we're not going to step into this. I mean, right now, whether people notice this or not, disclosure is happening in what they call a weathering, quote unquote. And a weathering is a very slow integration of so many different aspects into the public in a very slow ciphering type of way, where it doesn't upset too many people and maybe intrigues them into looking into the fact that maybe it's their idea that they're looking into this type of thing, which is obviously an operation, but I was pulled aside to meet with. I was living with Travis Walton at the time and Audrey Hewins. He lives in Snowflake, of course, Arizona, but he moved in with me and Audrey because they had fallen in love. And so we were doing a lot of this work back then and, hanging out, cutting up, just being friends. But we were invited to I don't know if you've heard of the Allagash twins, Jack and Jim Weiner.
Yeah.
1972 Allagash abduction, Maine. Those poor guys. I mean, it was great to meet them. We did eventually go out and meet with this guy, Bob. And he pulled out an 8x10 manila envelope and said, "Have you guys seen anything like this?" And I could tell it was gun camera footage.
Whoa.
So I pulled out my 2013 flip phone. Hey, I'm in my 40s. I didn't want to get into the whole smartphone thing, but I eventually did.
I hear you.
But I pulled out my little flip phone and showed him a better picture than he had. And he tells me, he said, "Do you mean to tell me that my $15 million plane and my $4 million gun camera can't get a better picture than you?" And I said, "Well, there's a difference between chasing it in the sky and this thing looking like it's going to land in your yard." But he was upset about it, and he immediately wanted to, go outside and talk. And here I am in the woods. There's a cabin, and I'm following this intelligence officer with a gun on his hip into the woods. And that I got to say, I didn't feel too smart at that moment. I'm thinking, oh my God, because he did seem really upset. And he did. He told me in 2017 that they were going to have a New York Times release, and disclosure is going to start. The hard part about that, and it really bothered him, I could tell, was that it was going to be pushed for a war type agenda, a war against the green bugs. He said, people like you with a solid case, know what you're talking about, need to get out there and combat this, because they're going to want people to vote on this type of interstellar war. And he said, it's wrong. And I asked him, I said, "Bob, what kind of twisted mind would look at this subject and think, let's just go to war? We don't know anything about it. Let's go to war."
Exactly.
And he said, "Eric, when your mind's shaped like a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. That's just our only way of thinking. It's the military." And I thought, oh my God, that's just insane. But it makes sense to them. But yeah, Bob, I believe, passed of colon cancer about five or 6 months later after that. I didn't know until recently when I looked him up, but it was unfortunate. But he seemed to be one of the only really good patriots that were really passionate about not making this about war and coming forward with disclosure.
For sure. And, we've been hearing about this type of thing ever since Werner von Braun and Project Bluebeam. And I mean, this is not new, but it does seem that disclosure has been a very long, slow process, and that would make sense. I wanted to get a little bit into the piezoelectric effects and the crystalline structure of the pineal gland, and you're able to actually make a sound with your brain, which has actually been recorded and proven. Can we get into the logistics of that a little bit?
Yeah, this is the part where your audience rolls their eyes.
I think it's awesome.
I don't like to, talk about it unless I'm in front of the actual person. But
yeah,
I guess there's enough samples out there where people can check it out on YouTube and maybe debunk or do what they want to do. But it is actually real. It happened to me after I got knocked down. It was one of the reasons why I thought maybe I had some sort of a tumor or brain problem, injury. Come to find out that I slipped into what you might call a Kundalini experience, where things became very spiritual for me. I didn't put on a robe and shave my head and walk around all funny. I'm an American. I'm gonna eat my hamburgers and bacon and drink my soda. But I did. I learned how to meditate and kind of tap into things that I never thought possible. I was just amazed by all of that. But being able to tap into that cauda putamen basal ganglia and really rock the antenna you can hear it audibly with a microphone,
Mm-hmm.
or if you want to listen to it with a stethoscope, or even if I just put my forehead on your forehead, you'll be able to feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
the beats per second and the control is actually better than I use my own voice. So it's pretty cool. It's fun. I listen to music, add to it, stuff like that. But yeah, there's going to take a lot of money and a lot of study to find out how deep this really goes, because most experiencers are pushing at about 30 hertz. They're not aware of it because it's not audible. But once you get a high enough electromagnetic field in your consciousness there, and it's really going, you'd be able to access that. And I've seen enough doctors look at me like a green bug, and I still don't have a diagnosis. So it's got to be one of these special access programs or universities, because I hound universities to look into this subject.
Mm-hmm.
It's so frustrating, Ryan, to know the truth, live in it, and try to contact these academics and say, look, but once your foot gets in the door, with a major university, what you can do is you can play that and say, you know what, this university over here in Texas, they're way ahead of you and you're not even looking into it. Here's some files, take a look,
For sure.
And that kind of makes them jealous because they love to be competitive with one another, as far as universities. So that's been helpful a lot. And I've been able to give information where it kind of dives off and it stops. And they're like, well, we found a lot of cool stuff, but where do we go from here? And I can say, well, okay, let's look at this part of the brain and see why this is possible. So I'm kind of taking myself and essentially back engineering so I can find out the answers, and science can too. Maybe it'll be in history books for kids one day.
I think so.
I know that it should be. I know disclosure has to be slow because the way it hit me, I was a skeptic. I didn't believe in that stuff. Never even looked into the subject, and it just destroyed my worldview overnight. So that's really destructive. I mean, that's edging toward suicide. That's edging toward full-blown depression and all kinds of things. And it's been a really rough road for me to accept these things. And I gotta say, I still have that skeptical snap in the back of my mind that I just leave files in until I see proof, evidence, documents, something. But yeah, I mean, in the very beginning, all I wanted to know was the truth. And YouTubeology is not the best way to go about that. But yeah, I've dug and dug and dug. I've read every document I can get my hands on. Sometimes I'll go to a conference and do a talk, and almost every time somebody will ask me to go to their room, a high official or something like that, and show me some documents.
Mm-hmm.
They have NDAs. They can't talk about this kind of stuff, but I can. So going over and being able to meet these people and looking at some of this information is just mind-blowing.
Yeah. And it like you said, it's very immersive. Like when it really just takes hold of experiencers. And let's get into something that fascinates me, which is the Egyptian correlations to the brain. I find it amazing. Some of the chambers, the pineal gland, etc. Can you explain that a little bit to listeners?
It would have to be speculation.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you see the piezoelectric effect going on in the pineal gland and it reaching out to the cauda putamen basal ganglia, it almost reminds you of the same technological setting of the pyramids itself. Because you have the king and queen's chamber, they're reaching out. You have this water underneath, which there's water circulation to the brain. You have Horus's eye, which is exactly what the pineal setting looks like. And it's all kind of painting a picture just from my side of the fence, because of everything I've seen and been through and can experience, that this thing, it looks more like a machine of consciousness than anything ever proposed to me before. Honestly, it's still a mystery, but looking at it, Believe it or not, I don't really converse a whole lot with ufologists. I talk to archaeologists. I talk to quantum physicists. I talk to botany experts. I mean, it's incredible what you learn about nature
Right.
and the possibility that this is a natural symbiotic circle somehow, and we just now really started to begin to accept it as a Western society. But you've got to look at it in every direction possible, because you might miss the most important detail in trying to understand.
Absolutely.
One certain thing I know for sure is we're not alone. I don't know where they're from. I know they've been here for a long time, and I don't know their names or what species they are. I know people like to call them grays or what have you, but they're definitely not pretty, and they have technology that looks like magic to us.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'm with you, Eric. I think so much gets lost in the semantics when people start naming it and trying to argue about what and, that type of thing. Kind of heading back a little bit in time, you spoke various times with Edgar Mitchell. What interesting information was he able to share with you before he passed? That would have been an amazing experience.
Oh, man. Believe it or not, we were working on the beginning of the free organization. And I had first met, Ray Hernandez. Mm-hmm. Amazing man, great guy. You want to talk about a go-getter. This man will work and not sleep constantly and get done what he needs to do. I'm surprised he's only a tax lawyer because, he belongs in a place where all his gifts can kind of come out. But I did say that I would, maybe consult or just be there, during meetings and stuff like that. So I got to know Edgar. And on Tuesday nights, he'd call me up and say, "You got your scotch?" And of course, I'm pretty much broke. I spend all my time, helping people like myself, and spend very little time at work, just enough to pay the bills and maybe some ramen noodles, So
I hear you.
I would always have my scotch, but guys, to be honest, it was a beer.
Sure.
But we honestly didn't speak a whole lot about UFOs. We really didn't. When Edgar once his rocket actually made it into space outside of the atmosphere and everything calmed down, mm-hmm. because it was really hectic on the way up, everything shaking and rattling, a very scary thing. But astronauts trained so well for that they stay calm and everything's fine. But once everything cleared and he was in the calmness of space, he just looked back into that porthole and realized the ridiculousness of this beautiful blue natural planet in just infinite space. And then we have all these people down here with greed and genocide and fighting and all these things. And I think for him, that very particular point was a huge epiphany, not just to his thought process, but to his very soul. I mean, he really felt that. And when he came back, it changed him. He was a very different person.
Wow.
So he really wanted to talk about, depths of philosophies and ways of seeing things. He did mention some things like Admiral Wilson, where they would, I believe that was a really big fight in ufology not too long ago. I try not to pay attention, but I did hear about it, and I was asked about it a few times. But that meeting did happen. He told me about it. Edgar's not the type of person to just fib about anything. Mm-hmm. Our Department of Foreign Technologies was not privy to the information. He didn't have a need to know. And he's the number one person on the planet that should know. He also talked about the 1947 crash with me. He did say he was in college at the time. I don't know. A lot of people don't know this, but he's actually from Roswell.
Oh, wow.
So, it's very coincidental, but him priming to be an astronaut, going to college, when he got back home, he had several admirals and people high up that said, "Edgar, this thing wasn't from here." They let him know flat out that, this crash was real.
For sure.
We talked very little about UFOs. It was more of an escape.
Yep.
type of conversation than, actual business.
Probably more important too, I think, from a human standpoint. It really is. And does it seem to you, Eric, that UFOs, you hear this from experiencers often, and I tend to agree that, but does it seem to you that UFOs follow you no matter where you live, that geographical location is not of importance?
Yeah, that's extremely true. I had a wonderful daydream in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
In August, my daughter got accepted to college in Maine, and so I was happy about that. I actually used it for an excuse to get the hell away. So I sold a plot of land that I had, and it was a really fast sale. I was happy about that, and I packed up that car and took off. I'm going to be 1,500 miles away from all of that, and I can start my life again. I can maybe put my roots into a normal life again. Because people, they work and they come home and they watch football and everything's simple and it doesn't have to be so complicated. And I had this daydream that I can get my life back, my simple world. Mm-hmm. And September 1st of 2014, on the third story deck of my new apartment with my new neighbors, they were handing me a Budweiser and nice to meet you. We weren't allowed to smoke inside, so the back deck was nice and big, and it was a good 60 feet up. And here comes this object through the park, up over the trees, and dipped down eye level, the streets right there in front of us. And it hovered there. My neighbors began pushing each other and kicking chairs over and doing everything they can to get into the back door to get away from this thing because it was really close. And of course, me and the kids just stood there because we were used to it by then. I was, needless to say, mortified because I knew I had gotten away from everything, and that was my first night in Maine. And there's just, it's also kind of difficult to really talk about, but like if people come from out of state to come visit me, they're going to have a sighting the night before. If I'm going to fly out to, let's say, New Jersey, mm-hmm. they're having a sighting over their home the night before that happens. So it's not just a thing that follows you if you move. It's a thing that follows what you're doing. And that's a really hard one to swallow. But once you see it every single time, I've moved, I think, about 9 times since the first incident. And it happens every time. I've got pictures from Las Vegas, South Carolina, Maine, Kentucky, everywhere I've been. And sometimes the picture doesn't come from me. Someone will knock on the door and say, hey, I took a picture of this thing, and it was over your house. Travis and Audrey, they were at a MUFON conference in Las Vegas one weekend. I didn't know what was going on, but there were 5 objects hovering over my bedroom. A man came outside to smoke. He filmed him, and he sent it into Channel 5 News. Well, this was like midnight. I was asleep. Woke up the next morning, opened the door because someone was knocking, and I've got tons of microphones just shoving into my front door, hitting me in the face, and just so many questions. And I just closed the door. I'm like, I'll deal with you guys one at a time. What's going on? I didn't know what had happened the night before, but I ended up doing 4 radio shows in downtown Portland, Maine, talking about the subject, which I felt really funny about. I mean, at 6:30 in the morning, and people are driving to work. They're not going to want to hear this kind of stuff. But, I mean, if you got to spread the word, spread the word. But a lot of people in Maine talked about that at one sighting, but that's just the kind of thing that happens. I actually just moved again, and I live in they're nice apartments. It's a big apartment complex, and the entire sky is just cut out of the middle of the entire complex, so it's a perfect place to really say, I'm going to have to move again when this happens, so. Yeah. But it's part of it. It's part of it. It really is.
It's part of the deal. It does seem like once you make that interaction or connection with, I guess, the universe, it's really impressive. And lastly, as we kind of start to wrap up, Eric, I don't know what direction to take it here. I guess many people believe that governments and other countries, including our own, have had treaties with these entities or beings or intelligences. Through your contacts, have you heard anything along these lines?
Unfortunately not, and I'm really waiting on it. I've looked for it. I know there was a lot of stock put into the idea of Project Serpo, where we had like a foreign exchange student program type of thing. But I've heard about it. I've even heard, professionals that, really dig into the subject, talk about it as if it's real. But I've got no evidence whatsoever. I've looked, and I've often asked people that want to share information with me. And you have to be careful, Ryan. You have to be careful. There are people out there among intelligence agencies that will just love to call you up and lie to you.
Right.
I mean, you can't take a word from these people. You obtain the documents, you make sure they're real, and then you can talk to the public about it. But I think Greer had a lot of trouble with that, Stephen Greer, because he spoke to so many disinformation agents that it kind of really messed things up for him, even though I believe he was true to his heart in getting the proper information. But I have not seen a real document on any interaction with other governments and these beings.
Exactly.
Now, I have seen documents where these things are hovering over a highly classified base, hovering over nuclear silos, and the silos shutting down remotely. Seeing this blue beam of light that we talked about earlier just go down and shut this thing off. Dummy warheads in the air that they're testing, just regular rockets, will be taken out of commission in midair, just by using this blue beam of light. So this blue stuff is really smart, to say the least. But I've seen plenty of documents, but none with a really cohesive conversation, any way of communication whatsoever from the government to them. I haven't really seen it. I'm looking for it, though. In some ways, I hope it's true, to kind of open the veil up a little bit. But man, I can speculate, but when it comes to cold hard facts, I haven't seen them.
Right. And lastly, something that's always really interested me is many have alluded to the fact that UFOs are dimensional. And what is your understanding of this possibility?
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. I mean, I really, really wouldn't. There are some ways that we can find. I think it went classified not too long ago, but NASA was looking at these things where the sun's energy was hitting the ionosphere of Earth. And it looked like, when you see a stream and some of the water has to swirl around a rock, and you have that little swirl, and then it kind of straightens out. And that's what you see in immediate space with this type of energy working, and it looks like a blue vortex that just opens. And NASA wants to be able to build some sort of rover or something to go in these things when they open up. The problem is they can't predict when that can happen. And I mean, that seems or looks to me like some kind of Rosen Bridge or highway or something like that. And why wouldn't nature have something like that for us? But I've seen these things, climb up and just disappear. I've seen them do things that, is completely outside of our own laws of nature. So, to say interdimensional, I would have to say it's more that it's more that than any kind of interstellar type of thing would be. I mean, it just seems like magic. You question your own sanity, and then you go get your own sanity checked, and they say you're fine. The drug and alcohol part, I have dependency on nicotine, and on the psychological part, I just have trouble adjusting to a trauma. And a lot of people have 12, 15, 20 things, issues to work on. But mine was I smoke cigarettes, and I've been traumatized. They can't even put PTSD, which I do believe I have it, but they believe I'm well-rounded enough to deal with it. But, you question your own sanity when you see these things right in front of you, and there's no way to subside it for yourself. So you always have to live in this duality and cognitive dissonance, and try to balance your life out.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you get this huge realization, this quantum entanglement with the universe, so to speak, and then you're forced to live a life where you have to have like discussions around the water cooler about things that don't matter. It's very, very interesting.
I know. I was at work not too long ago, and I had to endure about 5 people having a 20-minute conversation about the new Dorito that's coming out, and I couldn't even deal with it. I'm thinking, my gosh.
Yeah.
But that's how it is. That's literally how it is. You keep an even balance. I do anyway. I speak to experiencers from all over the world, in 127 different countries. And I work with a lot of them. A lot of them want to bring it up with their spouse. They want to bring it up to their brother or sister, family members, just kind of open up and release. And once the first initial conversation happens, they feel so much better about themselves because it relieves that internal binding that they have. So even talking to a stranger like me, it really helps the quality of life because you have to find that balance between this societal facade and reality itself. And people aren't ready to wake up for the most part. So
no. You
can't be running around just belting it, to the buildings and trees. You've got to find other ways. But for me, it's the most important thing is helping people out there that suffer the same thing. When you get into these zones of highly active psychic days or weeks or even months, it's hard to cope with. Television portrays psychic ability in such a different way than what it really is. It's more like it chooses you, and you don't really get to control it. You get to observe it, and it sporadically just kind of goes away and comes back. I had a dream a couple nights ago. This is just a day in a life. I had a dream about my friend needing surgery, getting very sick, and I knew what that was. I know the difference between a dream and a type of premonition. There's a very different feeling about it. So these are things that I hide from almost everyone. But my close friends are like, cool, do this, do that. They love it. Mm-hmm. My kids loved it too, but I called this friend and I said, look, you need surgery. It's your lower abdomen. Something needs to be removed. You're going to need to get checked for bacterial infection. And I just kind of named off all the symptoms. And she kind of giggled. She's like, how do you know that? I scheduled for surgery yesterday. I didn't even tell my parents yet. And I was like, you have to get it done. I was all over. You just do it. You have to get it done. And, of course, she already knew about the issue, thank God. But for the most part, when you come across these things, you just kind of watch them pass, But it's something you really have to hide from people because they really don't like it about you.
For sure. And I think that's something a lot of people appreciate about you, Eric, is you're trying to make a difference and you're doing it. And kind of getting, as we wrap up, getting to that, let's talk a little bit about your doc coming out, Experiencer. Where can people support it, donate it, and access it?
It's the same website you have. I really am terrible with computers, so I don't pay attention to the website or anything. But I bumped into some really famous networks, and they wanted to do a very lucrative type of thing. And the money looked amazing. I couldn't even believe that. But the problem is they wanted me to kind of dramatize it and lie.
Yeah.
And I wasn't happy about that. I talked to other networks. All of TV is basically the same. They're going to push for that kind of thing. So I met with UFO Garage podcast guys. Mm-hmm. Had a great time with them, and they seem so trustworthy and hardworking. And just, I look for integrity in people. When I'm dealing with things, I don't have enough time to deal with people without integrity. The finger pointers and the drama people, I don't have time for that. I mean, I've got a good 20-hour day every day ahead of me, mm-hmm. and I want to make every single one of them count. And it just kind of morphed itself into a film company. we started doing the project. I mean, there's no way to cover this in an hour or 2 hours, but I think a good introduction and some really hard evidence and really hard science, and a lot of spirituality on top of that needs to be kind of brought forward, into the light where at least if no one likes to watch it, the quintessential experiencer can watch it and go, oh my God, that's me too,
Yeah.
Help alleviate some of that cognitive dissonance. After you work with about 3,000 people, phonetically, you kind of understand the internal workings. And it's amazing how similar all these people are from different walks of life and countries and continents. And everyone's so different, but when it comes to this, it's extremely similar. And there's a mapping, sociological, psychological mapping that even psychology needs to branch out into and say, okay, I understand this now, But I even get psychologists that contact me on a regular basis. Like, I don't know how to treat my people, or this happened to me, and I know it can't be real. It's got to be psychological, what's going on with me. So those are the two kind of approaches you get from psychology.
Yeah.
But,
It does seem like there is a common thread, and in the things that I've seen about the documentary, it's just a beautiful, beautiful way of kind of getting that out there, getting the logistics of the situation and scenario and the phenomenon out there. And I think it's a novel idea, and I loved what I've seen so far. I'm just chomping at the bit and can't wait to watch it, man.
It's getting better every day. I mean, we're not a professional film team, but we're turning into one. And our initial thought was we'll pull out some cell phones and film that way, witness statements and all this stuff. I would, in the future, like to document professionally my entire case. And that's just, hey, Eric was here, to actually have it all down. Eventually, I'm going to pass away. My investigator, he's going to pass away. And this is not going to be told. And I think it's important, especially for people that are affected in the way I was. Some people, it takes them years. For me, it was just kind of an overnight, thing that I had to cope with afterwards and learning those mechanisms on a daily basis. But I want that documented, but I don't want a documentary being about me. Let's put some hard evidence in there. Let's put some credibility in there. That's fine. But I want to branch this out to all the people out there in the world that are suffering from this and have no one to talk to or go. It's a terrible thing to carry around.
Well, I know I appreciate you, and a lot of other people appreciate your efforts and what you're trying to do, and I think it's very noble. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast. I hope we can talk again soon.
Yeah, you absolutely have my number, man, and it'd be great just to talk anytime.
Right on. Well, until next time, I'll talk to you soon, and I'll let you go. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, my friend. You take care.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Eric Mitchell, not just an experiencer, but one that's doing something about it, trying to make a difference. And this epic documentary that will be coming out soon, please check it out. And it is experiencerdoc.com. And there's also a way to donate at that address. I would highly recommend doing that as well. Until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off.